This is a video of what traffic looks like on a road in Los Angeles, California. Now here is a video of oh my god, that is too many cars. Different example, please. That's better. Now here is a video of traffic on a road in Canberra, Australia, about 12,400 kilometers or 7,705 miles away from LA. Notice the difference between these two roads? I'll give you a hint. Pay attention to the sides the vehicles are keeping to. If you still haven't figured it out by now, the traffic in Australia is driving to the left side of the road. Now, I know you could be thinking to yourself, why? Why do you Australians drive on the left? Keep in mind, it's not just Australia that drives on the left. About a third of the world's sovereign countries drive on the left side of the road, with the most notable of which being the United Kingdom. In fact, out of the 10 most populous countries in the world, 4 of them are left-hand traffic, including the most populous nation in the world, India. So, why do some countries drive on what some would call the wrong side of the road? Well, believe it or not, back before cars even existed, it was considered the norm to keep to the left for one simple reason. Most people are right-handed. And by most, I am referring to about 88 to 90% of the world population. This would include myself and many of you watching this video. Back before vehicles existed, people traveled on horses, and since most people mount horses from the left side, they would keep to the left to not only prevent themselves from mounting in the middle of the road, but to also have their dominant hand closer to the center of the road. Therefore, suppose an enemy of theirs crosses their path, one could simply wield a weapon with ease. The practice of keeping to the left side of the road continued, with Britain even making it compulsory in 1835. So, how exactly did many countries switch to the right side? One word: Napoleon. Napoleon, according to some records, was left-handed, which logically implied keeping to the right side of the road. When he conquered many other European countries, he forced them to switch to the right side. Then, when France and Britain started colonizing parts of the world, their driving side would be adopted by these new colonies. In the United States, however, it was a completely different story. Americans have been driving on the right ever since colonial times due to Conestoga wagons. These type of wagons were pulled by up to 8 horses, which leads to the question, of these 8 horses, which one would you ride on? Assuming that you are right-handed, like about 90% of the world, you would ride on one of the horses on the left, and considering that you will need to control all of these horses, you would sit on the rear-end horse on the left to whip all of these horses easier. Because of this, Conestoga wagons rode on the right so the driver of them could see oncoming traffic. And then, cars were invented, and although the first cars were right-hand drive cars, meaning that the steering wheel was on the right side, Henry Ford discovered it was safer for drivers to be closer to the center of the road, thus placing the wheel on the left side. Other car manufacturers later followed suit with Ford's Model T, and with the boom in the automobile industry, this led to many countries switching to driving on the right in order to fit in with their neighboring countries. Some countries didn't initially make the switch until later in the 20th century, with a notable example of this being Sweden. Until 1967, residents of Sweden still drove on the left, but there were 2 problems. 1, Norway and Finland, the 2 countries that Sweden borders, both drive on the right, and 2, about 90% of Swedish people at that time drove left-hand drive cars, while also driving on the left side of the road, consequently causing more head-on collisions. Despite an unsuccessful 1955 referendum, the plan to change driving sides in Sweden was approved by the Riksdag in 1963, and on September 3, 1967, Swedish people were directed to switch to the right in what is now called Dagen H, or
högertrafikomläggningen.
Fellow Nordic country Iceland, located near the now fully right-side traffic Scandinavian peninsula, also switched from driving on the left to the right less than a year later. Now that I've talked about countries that switch from the left to the right, you might be now wondering, have any countries switched back to the left? The answer is yes, and there are a few examples. Let's take a look at Namibia. Namibia was initially a German colony, but when South Africa invaded and occupied it during the First World War, Namibia switched to left-hand traffic in order to fit in with South Africa. Timor-Leste, a small country occupying about half the island of Timor, was a Portuguese colony. In 1928, along with the rest of Portugal, it switched to right-hand traffic. However, when Indonesia invaded the newly proclaimed nation in 1975, later annexing it the following year, Timor-Leste switched back to driving on the left, which it still does to this very day. Finally, the most recent switch occurred in September of 2009, when the small island nation of Samoa switched to driving on the left side for economic reasons. It was easier for the country to import cars from Australia, New Zealand, and Japan, all 3 of which are left-hand traffic countries. Until this time, Samoa had been importing American cars, which was more expensive to do so. So on September 7th, 2009 at 6 a.m. local time, Samoan residents were told to switch sides of the road. Because of this, Samoans also got a 2-day holiday for people to get used to these new rules, and to prevent more accidents from occurring, a 3-day ban on alcohol was put into effect. Finally, how do neighboring countries who drive on the opposite side of the road help travelers switch to this side of the road when crossing borders? Well, it really depends on which countries, but here are a few examples. I hope you enjoyed today's video. You might as well subscribe if you're into content like this. This is GeoToday, out.